Oh, there we go.
Now you have feedback.
You all mind saying something online? So we know we can hear you.
Sure thing.
All right, great.
Brad.
Hallelujah.
Wonderful.
All right, we're ready?
Recording in progress.
Ready.
Okay, I call to order the March Ways and Means Committee meeting. Roll call, please.
Chairwoman Sims.
Here.
Alderman Gould.
Here.
Alderwoman Tice.
Here.
Alderwoman Harder.
Here.
All members present.
Great, thank you. Item 2 on the agenda is approval or amendment of the agenda. Does anybody have any comments or proposed changes? All right, seeing none, that'll be approved by acclamation. Item 3 of the agenda is the report of committee chair and alderman. I have no report. Alderman Gould?
No report.
Alderwoman Tice?
No report.
Alderwoman Harder?
No report.
Great. Item 4 on the agenda is the city administrator report. 4A is the investment report. Who is taking the lead on that? Brad, whenever you're ready.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for having me. A month or so ago, maybe 2 months ago, when I was there in person, we talked about changing the report style for the investment earnings. So they show it's a little bit more of a focus on 2024 earnings, and then keeping track of the securities and the earnings and all of the accounts from inception to the end of 2023. So I'm hoping that you have a 3-page document in front of you. If you don't, it'll be my fault because I got it to Kelly pretty late.
I put it in there.
Yep,
It's there. We have it.
We just got it.
Perfect. Okay, so for this one, since there wasn't a February meeting, I wanted to give you what we would have shown you. And so that's just page 1. And what that looks like is the first portion, the first little spreadsheet there, just shows you all the active accounts, because if you remember, there are some that are closed out. So these are all the active accounts that we're tracking moving forward this year. So the 14, 17, 18, and 19 debt service reserve fund and the custody account. Each of those obviously earning interest. And so for the month of January, they earned $62,672. If you go the spreadsheet below it, that is a constant number. Those are all the accounts that we have managed since our relationship began, all the way to December 31st of 23. And that is a $2.7 million total earnings. So we would add the two together to get a total over time. If we go to page 2, this will be for February. So you see the total is now combined of January's plus February. So now from January to February, these 5 accounts have earned $123,000 in interest. Below it is 2.7 million earned over time. Page 3. This is just kind of the beginnings of the graph that I've been showing you guys just month to month. Month of January, you all earned about 62,000. Month of February, about 60,000. That's just fluctuation in yield and securities maturing and all that stuff. So right now we're hovering at the $60,000 a month mark, which is fantastic. A little bit of an update for you on the market. There's a lot of talk right now about the Federal Reserve lowering interest rates. That's the Fed funds rate. That'll have some immediate pressure, downward pressure on short-term investments. Through BOLA and Michelle, we have the city laddered out very nicely for a number of years at what are still the highest rates that we've seen since 2007. So I think we feel pretty strongly that this is a wonderful investment strategy set up to earn today's interest rate for a long period of time And if interest rates on the short term end up lowering here in the next few months, that's okay, because we have lots of securities maturing and are laddered out at higher interest rates. So you're protected from a declining rate environment. That's just how we plan to continue with the ladder unless funds are needed or we're directed otherwise.
That's great. Thanks, Brad. Does anyone have any questions? Not seeing any. Great news. Keep up the good work. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate it. Have a good night.
You as well. All right, moving on to 4B. This is the discussion of the PayPoint HR evaluation of employee compensation benefits and pay structure. Who is leading us for that?
Hi, good afternoon. Tangela Bell, HR Manager. So we do have Rick Campbell from PayPoint HR who has a presentation for you. I just want to give a little background. I do want to clarify, this isn't the actual kickoff meeting. They will be on site for that initial meeting. We do hope to accomplish tonight getting our comparators information together so that Karen and Rick can know how to start to get that information together. So we would like to have that done when we conclude tonight. We will discuss the methodologies that we can use for that. I know there's been questions about standard deviation and such, and we will talk about implementation strategy as well as the timeline.
Great.
So I'll let Rick take over.
Okay, and it looks like everybody can see my PowerPoint. Advantage of seeing myself there. Well, thank you for this opportunity of working for the city. Our approach, and I'll just get to the meat of it. Be mindful of everyone's time as best I can. That we use across the country is effectively to use 3 yardsticks to figure out what fair pay looks like. One of the yardsticks that we use is we look at the external market, and as Tangela was mentioning, it's part of the discussion for this evening. Who are the appropriate comparators for Brentwood? Second yardstick that we use to figure out what fair pay is, org structure, to make sure that you have the right hierarchy relative to managers and supervisors and superintendents and the like. And then the third yardstick that we use is looking at the knowledge, skills, and abilities of all the positions at the city. Typically, our approach is to engage employees at that third yardstick, to have them provide us feedback on what do they do on a day in, day out basis, and then have a subsequent supervisor review, not just from a checks and balance to make sure everything is accurate, which is true, but also to make sure it's complete, that all the things that people are going to be doing later on this year are captured in information that we have. This information, it's our intention to share to all parties, employees, elected officials, administration, so that at the end of the day, everybody's on the same page, that the whole approach is open and transparent. That's PayPoint's goal in this process. Now, at the end of the day, we combine those 3 different yardsticks together to come up with what makes sense for Brentwood. Now, the reason why we use the 3 yardsticks, one of our earliest client was actually a city in Missouri, college town that has over 100 parks in their city. When we did the external market portion of the study, a lot of similar size organizations basically put Parks and Rec kind of here. But now where that city evaluated them on the org structure was up here, and the knowledge, skills, and abilities that was required for the position was also up here. So fair pay for them wasn't exclusively what everybody else was doing, but what was appropriate for them, taking into consideration all the different factors. That's our general, approach from the 10,000-foot view, but I'll go through it in a little more detail in the slides that follow. So this next slide is covering all of what I just said in words. Just sometimes it's helpful, particularly when you go back and if you have opportunity to review why we're doing this approach, but this is covering that. Now, in terms of the internal equity, that's looking at the knowledge, skills, and ability of job titles. We provide a pretty straightforward job analysis questionnaire, asking employees to fill it out. There is not a right or wrong way of doing this that we will explain to them. We just want their input. So if they want to work collectively in groups, that's good and fine. If they can get their kids or spouses to fill it in, whatever makes sense to them is good as long as they sign up to it at the end of the day. And as I mentioned, there is a checks and balance as part of this process. Now on to the kind of external, market portion of the project. And I'll talk about the comparators here closer towards the end. This is just trying to give you an overview. We look at each individual job type separately. So it is possible at the end of the day that we will find that, for example, police sergeants are substantially under market pay wise. And then lieutenants could be the opposite, they are paid, better. Because every job title is effectively their own market. A good chunk of the report will look exactly what's on the screen there. You'll see what the 20th percentile to the 80th and kind of everywhere in between. And it's easy enough math-wise to go higher and lower, depends on the requirements of the city. But we present this information in a kind of in the public document so that everybody's on the same page to have an understanding of what the market looks like. Now, part of our explanation of things is, first off is what is a market percentile? So the 50th percentile is an easy one to explain. It just means that that dollar amount, 50% of the organizations pay more and half pay less than that amount. If you were to go up to the 70th percentile or 75th percentile, perhaps, it's an easy one to explain. That means 1 out of 4 organizations pay better than that dollar amount, and 3 out of 4 pay less. You notice I'm not using the word, average or standard deviations or anything like that. Just because sometimes statistics can sometimes misrepresent what's actually, going on, if you will. You can have for an average, for example, you have an average of the number 0. That could mean all the respondents are close to 0. And it could also mean half are 10% above and half are 10% below. You average them together and it still produces 0. So that's why, we try to be very careful and specific in our language, just so that, again, everybody can understand, what is being conveyed. Because this is an important and sensitive topic for employees. It's about their livelihood, but also taxpayers, so that they have a complete understanding of what's going on. But all job titles are identified and will be produced in several series of tables looking just like this. Now, as I mentioned, part of our process in having those 3 yardsticks is ideally for the 3 to say the same things. So we do a lot of work to correlate the different pieces of information. What you have there on the screen is the kind of the correlation between the knowledge, skills, and ability, which is there on the horizontal axis, and what the market is paying at that 50th percentile for the various different job titles that we go out and survey. In this case, it's a very, very high degree of correlation. Part of that is based on the methodology that we use. We don't use a cookie cutter approach. So every client is unique. So what works for Brentwood is not going to be the same thing for any other neighboring city or county or whatever the case may be, because it's relevant to your data and what's valuable and important to you. So in a lot of ways, we reinvent the wheel every time we do a study. It's part of our process to make sure the information that is being used is relevant to the client, and that just makes the most sense for us. What I have here on the screen is one of the presentation or part of the presentation typically I give at near the end of the study, perhaps first to you and then to the larger group of aldermen, what the financial impact of kind of all the recommendations are. So we typically break it out by department and then give kind of an overall summary of where titles are at. so that you can make a, strategic decision on where you want pay to be. And then the financial cost of being at that market level. That's what makes the kind of the most sense to us. We can certainly give a recommendation. Occasionally our clients, ask us for, our 2 cents. But at the end of the day, this is, a tax and, budget kind of question, and a strategic vision kind of question that, really only, our clients can answer it the best. But this is kind of what it looks like on a top level. And we provide this for a series of different market levels, again, so that you can make, intelligent decisions on where you want to be at. We also will break it down by job titles. In this case, for the 75th percentile, we highlight the groups of job titles that are substantially below market. That means for us more than 10%. And then also the job titles that are just below market, between 5 and 10%. Part of our procedure is really not a cost of living adjustment that you don't need kind of an outside, consultant, really advice on that. This is more of, let's identify the job titles that are a little bit out of alignment and, try to make recommendations and adjustments for those titles in particular. Now, as I mentioned, I'm using the word titles deliberately, because a title can mean one thing, and that's not necessarily the same thing, as an individual. Because an individual could be, starting off, brand new in the job, and another one could be there for 30 years. And so how you take into account the proper placement in a salary structure kind of is the last step, if you will, in the process. Oftentimes we're asked if there's a variation between the current salary structure and what we see in the market. We provide, a updated salary scale, whether it's a range system like I have shown here, or even or a step system, whatever makes the most sense. In the past year or two, many of our clients, basically just because of changes in starting pay, for a lot of municipalities, it's, while the federal government and states have a certain dollar amount, the practical reality is that dollars, you're competing sometimes with the, Walmarts of the world, and what they are starting off with pay. So in a lot of cases, that's what's, driving this process. But our recommendations at the end, again, has to make sense for our clients. Now we'll break it down, like I mentioned, at the end here in terms of, dollars and cents by individual, and to know, the financial costs of the different parts. Here, this is relative to, like I mentioned, in a step system, and the total number of positions that were impacted, and then the cost by the different, buckets, if you will. And then again, we'll look at it across, several different market choices, whether 75th percentile. I know there's been discussions at higher levels or even lower levels, whatever in the end, makes sense from a budgetary perspective. Now, one of the most important parts for Karen and myself when we created this company is, Karen's background originally is in HR. She had her own payroll company for many years. When we got married, we decided to kind of combine our forces, in life and in work. My PhD is in mechanical engineering, so you kind of guess I'm more than numbers person. But we come from very different backgrounds than in the class and comp world originally. So it made sense to us to have kind of the mindset of not only being transparent, but also to, all the information and tools that we develop as part of this process is to give it to our clients, because it's tailored and unique for each and every one of them. So it just makes a lot of sense to us that you have the tools necessary to implement things not only today, but also if inflation in the economy, settles down a little bit, to have a system in place that you can use going forward, again, relative to your data. So we provide kind of not only forms and the like, but also the methodology that allows you to evaluate job titles that take on additional responsibility and how to properly, compensate them or to reclassify them potentially, or for brand new job titles and that you're bringing into the city, on how to, an objective way of placing them in the pay structure that's preserving the internal equity, but also being, externally competitive as well. This is, as I mentioned, some of the forms that we provide for implementation. Now, some of our clients, continue to ping us, on a regular, basis, years and years down the road. I mean, that's we're happy to, continue to work with our clients, whether or not it's just a call and helping to explain something or to go over something, quickly, or a more extensive type of thing. Again, we're in this business to help people get paid fairly, and kind of that's, our overall approach. That's kind of what we're going to be presenting to, most of these slides, again, to employees when we really kick off the process. But it's good that everybody, again, is on the same page, particularly this committee as we get started, so that, there is no surprises kind of at the end, or you're trying to digest a lot of information at the 11th hour. It's better at, in this case, 5:52 is a better time to do so. Now, one of the things that I also, part of the big things that we wanted to talk about this evening is potential comparators. We do have the list, and I independently quickly looked through kind of some of the typical socioeconomic factors that we typically evaluate, that we provide for all of our clients. I don't see anything dramatically askew, if you will, of the 14 that you used the last time, except for 2 occasions. And if you choose to use it, that is your choice. And there is not a right or wrong way of doing this. I just noticed for 2 of the communities, and possibly even 3, one of the third one being Town and Country, Ladue and Frontenac, where their median household income is very high in comparison to Brentwood. That'd be one thing. And also, if you do a comparison of their property values, they are also, substantially, higher, 3 to 4 times higher in both in property value and household income relative to Brentwood. So that may be of concern to you. It is not so egregious that it's, night and day difference. It would kind of pass the muster, if you will, in looking at it from, the holistic picture. I just wanted to bring that kind of to your attention. But then there's also, as you certainly know better than I do, there is a good number of communities that are in close proximity to Brentwood. Some of them are not, in my estimation, good comparators for labor. And I guess the proper term is a little bit in the northern portion of the county, whether that's Ferguson or Berkeley or the like. That those based on, again, the same kind of things, the property value, property taxes, household income, poverty rates, and the like. They're on the opposite end of the spectrum. They are very dissimilar. The math shows that they would not be a reasonable comparator. But then there's also a couple, again, on our first cut that you may want to consider. I've provided that list to Tangela probably a good, I'll say hour ago. That's kind of the time frame we're on, if that would be for something to consider. And I'm happy to answer any and all questions that you may have.
What's that? You,
Yeah, there we go. Thank you.
just to your observation about the extent to which our comparators may be altered because of, you referenced property value. I'm inclined to, I don't know if you were aware, but I would say that the revenue generated by property tax represents a very small amount of our budget. We rely greatly, overwhelmingly on our sales tax. And given our, even notwithstanding our size, I would say our economy is kind of complex in light of our size with regards to the businesses that are here. And
Sure.
so I'm not, with that knowledge, I don't know if that would change your outlook, but I'm inclined to not. Yes, it's true. Ladou's property value is higher than Brentwood's, but I would say we do circles around them in terms of what our business and sales tax activity is. So I'm not inclined to X out a comparator city for that reason. But that was my initial observation. But certainly this is please open forum. Feel free to ask questions. Alderwoman Tice.
As usual, I have a lot to say. So I got looking at this a couple days ago before we even got the agenda, and I looked at the comparators that we used the last time, and I compared it with Clayton, and the list that we got from Clayton, and we compared it with the list that we got from Kirkwood. And then I talked to Bola, because I'm like, what are the criteria? Because it's not just population, because there was a list in a presentation we got with, and I think this was based on population, and that doesn't seem to be it. So she did put together, I think Jim McIntyre and Tangela really worked hard on adding to this, what I started on a spreadsheet a couple days ago, adding lots of different things, like do we lose employees to them? So like Ladou is someone we lose employees to. So in my mind, we ought to keep Ladou because we lose employees to Ladou. So that's a good comparator. And are they managed, like, it's so hard to read, or it's on here. Are they professionally managed cities? The physical size, the class of the city, are they members of Slate? Are the sales tax, are they A or B pool cities on tax, number of employees, that kind of thing. So I feel like we can't just, I think we need to look at all of this collectively when we think about our comparators, and we can't just say, oh, it's size of the city, oh, it's household income, oh, it's whether they have their own fire department or they have a fire district. I think we really need to, we live in an odd county with all these municipalities, and we need to look at, reasonably look at them. So, I mean, I guess my opinion is I don't really see a reason to throw out any of the ones we had before. And then in my mind, the question is, who do we want to add? Is sort of how I'm thinking of it, but we could, I mean, maybe we do want to throw out some we had before, but are there others that we lose to? Are there some that are growing? Are there some with tax bases that are similar that aren't on here? Like I was surprised to see U City wasn't a comparator before.
Sure. Typically, kind of our approach when we develop our list, and this was in our initial PowerPoint, is effectively we draw a circle around, our client and say, is this a commutable distance? Are you going to potentially attract people from these different municipalities? And sometimes the answer is yes or no. And miles doesn't necessarily always mean, that people will necessarily commute from there. Particularly when you have a large number of cities or other municipalities, close by. Basically, in my way of thinking is that you really want to just try to eliminate the ones that are on the extremes, that either much poorer and just night and day, difference on that end of the spectrum, or on the very high side of the spectrum that are, way, wealthier and are not, reflective of the finances of Brentwood. I mean, that is an approach just so that the outliers are not considered, if you will. But at the end of the day, part of what makes the most sense to me is that you have a reasonably good sample size, that you don't have for me, again, being the former engineer, more data, always the better. Just so that we don't have one place artificially, skewing things. For example, if out of the 14 that you had originally, if for one job title you only had 2 or 3 respondents, if those are the 3 wealthiest places, that could artificially, push things up. And you don't want to have that because you want to be, respectful to taxpayers. You also don't want the other extreme where they pay substantially lower and, artificially lower with fair pay. So for me, I just want a, reasonable sample size. There'll be highs and there'll be lows. And then based on kind of that, population that is, again, within kind of commutable distance, then you have the opportunity to, strategically place yourself in the market wherever it makes sense. If it's a smaller list, then, or a larger list, that's kind of your, a final choice, at the end of the day, as part of this process. The only thing that's, I don't say is very challenging, particularly for municipalities that are very, very wealthy, for example, and all the communities around it are not, then they're going to be here and everybody else down here. So it's hard to make a comparison in that case. The opposite is also true when the community that I work for is not as well off as surrounding communities. Then, where do you position them relative to those organizations? So as long as you have kind of a group that at the end of the day that you are comfortable with, it'll work. It just, again, my approach is to eliminate the outliers, get something, a good sized group that looks fair for taxpayers and employees. And then, again, at the end of the day, where you position yourself relative to them, kind of is the one last dial that you can use to dial in what is appropriate.
Alderman Gould.
Yeah, I think when I look at our 14, what stands out to me that maybe is a missing element is, I mean, this area, if you will, is a very commuter heavy area, and the trend that we've been seeing over the past decade is it's expanding more and more. So you're going to have people that it's not unheard of for somebody to drive 45 minutes to go to their job. And one of the things that I think is definitely missing are some of the growth areas that we're seeing, for example, in St. Charles or Wentzville, those, and when you look at the labor force, that's probably where a lot of them are living. And so, as those communities are experiencing growth and the central corridor is experiencing maybe a decline in population size, we need to make sure we're competitive with as those, municipalities or cities grow. They're going to be looking for more and more workforce there. So I think, it would be smart of us, maybe it's not Ladue, but maybe we do look at reducing one of the higher household income and property and then adding in some of the further distance. And I don't know if you would be able to help us even saying of our staff, what's the longest driving distance that we've historically had? Where do they live and who are some of the
employees or for the cities that are comparators?
for our employees, so that we can compare potentially who they might be considering as an employer in this type of.
So it depends on the group of employees. So Chief Cottrell can probably speak to, I say average, what would be the furthest for a firefighter, our current firefighters commute?
Sure. So currently we have one individual that drives an hour and a half one way, but we have 48-hour schedules. And so just a few years ago, we had an individual that lived in Columbia, Missouri, because he was able to commute. He no longer does, but for several years, he chose to do that. So that is common with the 48-hour schedule.
Right, yep. And I would guess, you know,
And so for other non-uniform, I think maybe, Tangela, what's your commute?
My commute is about 35 to 40 minutes. I come from O'Fallon, St. Peter's.
Right.
And then just to add in there, Rick mentioned just the suggestions that he could recommend would be University City, Wentzville, Sunset Hills, Olivet, Manchester, Eureka, Crestwood, and Bridgeton, in addition to our current comparators.
yeah, so
Your
What's
current-
already in
your
there.
Kirkwood's already in
comparator.
ours, yeah. So I think those are, I think what Alderwoman Tice brings up and potentially expanding, you know, commuter distances for employees that we're trying to attract and retain. It'd be good to know how we compare to some of those other offerings. My other question that I had isn't related to comparators, but you spoke about, you know, comparing titles. And I think some of the things that we get into challenges with is when other municipalities don't title them the same, but we have operational responsibility when you compare two different titles. One, they kind of look like the same function for the city. How do you kind of reconcile that?
Very, very easy. So, part of our external survey that we send out includes a summary of the position. So it's giving you more than just the two words that is used for the title. So that's better apples to apples comparison. That's one way that we do. But we also, like I mentioned, have 3 yardsticks on our approach. So in the case where, like I mentioned, relative to that Parks and Rec and that one community, that university town that I talked about, you know, the external market for them was not the appropriate measure. We had those other 2 measures to make sure that it made sense for the organization. So that's a kind of a second way that we look at to make sure that every job title is treated fairly. But for the external market data, we provided a summary for the various positions to make sure that, you know, we are comparing to the best of our abilities, apples to apples. And we're asking the various HR departments for the comparator organizations to, you know, based on their knowledge of their positions, to provide that kind of feedback for us.
Thank you. And then as it relates to comparators, am I kind of making the assumption correct here in that if you get a little more finer detail on the selection of the comparators and sort of eliminating some of the outliers and having a little bit more rigor around the selection of that, is it your understanding or your recommendation that you then thereby don't need things like standard deviation when you look at the comparator? Or how do you feel about using statistical things like that?
Well, again, my PhD is in mechanical, so I know all the math, for better or worse.
Yeah,
I deliberately chose not to use those words tonight.
yes,
I use
course
other
you do.
words that even worse than that. You know, one of the things in my final report is it is the correct math term is, you know, this Chev inequality to make sure things are done right. I put it in there because it's correct, but you know, I get glazed eyes sometimes from my wife in particular when I mention that to her. It's our running joke for the past decade now. So standard deviations are only really relevant when you start looking at averages and trying to assume a certain distribution. You know, if you think it should look like a bell curve or, you know, a Weibull distribution or whatever else the case may be. That's where that's kind of valuable to know how things are shaking out relative to that. But in terms of looking at salary data, in my opinion, that's of no value Because if you have a couple places that are paying much, much better than Brentwood, that can skew things tremendously, you know. But if you're looking at accounting kind of numbers, like market percentiles, well, that doesn't do it. They could be at the 95th percentile or whatever is, you know, those outliers, if you will. And that's okay. That doesn't skew things. It just means they are way much, much, much higher or much, much lower, as the case may be, versus saying something that it is, you know, 3 standard deviations away. That doesn't, you know, make as much, it's a lot hard to explain, and doesn't clarify things. The table where I showed you before, and we'll bring it back up here momentarily. You can bear with me. So that is why we more or less present, you know, this kind of table for every job title, what the 20th typically to the 80th is. So I can say at that 80th percentile, I didn't use the word standard deviation. That means if you have 10 organizations, 2 pay more, and I'll use the maintenance worker as an example here, the 80th percentile at $18.09 in this case. 2 organizations paid better than $18.09, and 8 out of 10 paid less. That everybody can understand.
Right.
You know, that is showing the market. And I don't have to use fancier, you know, math terms to explain that, all right, 80th percentile is, you know, it's probably about 1.8 standard deviations away from the mean. That's what it probably really is, you know, in terms of the math. One makes sense, that's everybody understands, the other one is just math.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
So can I go back to the comparisons? So Tangela, you threw out some other communities. Can you to add to our current list? Is this like, are we going to walk out of here tonight with a list of comparators? Is that the goal?
I would like to,
Okay.
so that we can get started and plan for their actual on-site kickoff meeting.
Perfect. So can you run through the ones you were wanting to add and?
And again, this is from Rick's analysis or just his overall for now. U-City, Bridgeton, Crestwood, Eureka, Manchester, Olivet, Sunset Hills, and Wentzville.
Okay, so seems reasonable to me. It seems totally reasonable to me.
Yeah, no,
but-
I think
yeah.
that makes sense. Is there, I wasn't a part of this board when we were identifying comparators. Is there something philosophical about adding to the list that, I mean, if we said that as a committee versus moving forward, I mean, I don't want to,
Nothing that deep.
okay, I just, you know, and Alderman Plufka, not to put you on the spot, but I'll put you on the spot. We certainly would recognize you if you had comments or questions. I mean, I think this makes sense. I didn't want to, after the fact, someone, you know, shake their hand at me and say, you know, we spent a lot of time on these comparators and how dare you add more? Like, you know, and from, you know, intuitively, I'm inclined to add O'Fallon as well because of the growth. And I think Alderman Gould, you made a very good point earlier. And just from my eyes, I can see that city appears to be seeing a lot of growth in that we have in fact attracted from there. You're living proof of that. Oh, sorry, but they're nearby. So, I mean, that would be my observation. Are there any issues do you see with just increasing the comparators to that amount from your?
From my perspective, more is always better as long as they are not exceptionally, you know, different for one reason or another. So some of the ones like a Berkeley or a Ferguson or a Jennings, those, looking at the different socioeconomic factors that I have up there, or poverty rate, they're not the same. Yeah, you compare yourselves against them? Yes, you would be at the higher end, relative to them in those cases. And I'm sure you can know some places that are even far, far wealthier than Brentwood in terms of their total dollar amounts that they bring in. And you will be nominally, lower than them. You just, again, want to have a good representative sample, so that you can make, intelligent, kind of decisions on it. The only part that I don't like is that once we go out to all these communities, and get the data and present the final report, that we start cherry picking at the end, saying, well, this place is higher, let's throw them out, and things like that. It's better to be, kind of do that today or over the next whatever time frame makes the most sense to you, and say, all right, this is the group that we're going to compare ourselves to go against, and then however the responses come in, at the end, whether or not you want to be in the top 5 or whatever the case may be, then you make that kind of decision versus cherry picking data at the end.
May I ask a question? Does it matter, Rick, so this is Bola Conde, does it matter if some of these cities that we are considering to be comparators, if those cities already have a compensation philosophy at something less than where we currently are? Because I know some to be at 50%, 50th percentile. Some may be at 70th percentile. Does that matter? Just a question.
It does not matter.
It does not
That
matter.
is-
Okay.
I could turn around and instead of looking at this from a city perspective, it's the individual employee. All right. If you are attracting or potentially losing an employee, they're going to look at the salary ranges. All right, and I don't know this for a fact. Maybe it's I'll pick on town and country, and there's not intentional, it's just showing up on my screen. I can know if I know their salary range and I know it at Brentwood, and if they're going to pay me $10 more an hour, okay, I'm going to go there. I don't need to know what their compensation philosophy is. I just know the dollars. And vice versa. It works both directions, certainly.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
One of the big issues we had previously is that there aren't as many cities with fire departments, so that particular, those particular jobs have fewer comparators. It looks like we're now up to 12. If we're adding all of it in U City, if I'm reading this chart right, they both have fire departments. Is that a reasonable number? Is that, I guess I just want to make sure that we have the right comparators as we're going in.
Sure. Now, I would include, my choice would be, to include fire protection districts if possible. The only problem is when you send out a survey to them, they'll look at you strange at best because they'll not know what it is. So in those cases, we would probably have to ask for either the chief's help or one of his, designee to, ask those different groups to, provide, to send me directly the data. Because process-wise, I can't receive information directly from employees because that would not be fair to taxpayers. I need it coming from a third-party source.
I think there's a way to do that. And
Okay, yeah.
we would go through Tangela so
Okay.
that it would be HR to HR
Okay.
for consistency.
And then the question then I have is, they have a completely different taxing district, so I'm definitely supportive of going out to the fire districts, but, the tax pool that they have to dedicate to fire is also different. So I'm pretty sure Clayton, took all fire districts and, averaged out 5 or 6 or 4 or however many they surveyed into, pretended like it was one municipality, if I'm understanding that correctly. I just want to make sure that we're respecting our police officers and our taxpayers with what the salaries might look like.
Sure, but they could be very well, competitors for employees. Employees have a, choice on where to work. And yes, there's the taxpayer side of things, certainly on what is affordable for Brentwood. But it's, both sides. Now, and again, the last dial that's, that you'll have to decide on is relative to all the different organizations that participate, that responds back to our survey, where do you want to, rank relative to them within your budget? That is part of the message that we are going to be conveying, certainly to employees, is that, I've heard discussion that, currently things are at 75th percentile, and maybe some people want it at the 95th. Well, that's good and fine, but it also has to be, that was on one set of comparators, and that's the past. Because the economy's changed tremendously the past 2 years, lots of different places. So we're going to pull from this new set of comparators, ask them directly what they pay, and then working with this group, figuring out where is the most responsible thing for taxpayers and your employees on where pay is fair at the end of the day. And don't have any kind of preconceived notions on what was done necessarily. The methodology in the past has to be done exactly the same way in the future, other than treating everybody, respectfully and fairly.
Well, I think we need buy-in on certainly board and employees, because we've had a different, we've gone into this with a different philosophy because we had a different set of tools that we used to set the salary. So I think if we're going to have that discussion, that's bigger than I certainly thought we were going to have. It seems like a discussion we probably should have, but it's a much bigger and different discussion.
Well, I agree with the philosophy, but if we've expanded our pool of comparators, enlarging it, I think, substantially, and we find that we still want to, I think we can still, as a board, philosophically decide that's where I want to be, and maybe it's the 95th percentile, maybe it's not, but that's kind. I agree with what he's saying, that those are old numbers. Now we've got new data, and we need to then, once we have the data, we need to then, as a board, decide where we want our needle to be. And I think we can. I think, unless I'm missing, I think we can proceed with gathering this intelligence, and then have a recommendation about where that needle should be, and then of course that would go to the board for further discussion. Does that seem like an okay approach?
Yeah, that does.
Are we? And I don't want to jump over anything. Are we clear on the additional comparators that we're
List out total.
we're adding?
So the total list would be with the current comparators: Baldwin, Chesterfield, Clayton, Creve Coeur, Dupere, Ellisville, Frontenac, Kirkwood, Ladue, Maplewood, Maryland Heights, Richmond Heights, Town and Country, Webster's Grove. And then we will add in, University City, Bridgeton, Crestwood, Eureka, Manchester, Olivet, Sunset Hills, Winsville, and O'Fallon.
I thought O'Fallon made
Yes.
sense.
And O'Fallon.
Are there?
Or is that? I mean, it's really, it's 90. It's
93 population.
Do we have any of that? I mean, I guess employees are employees, and I shouldn't be focused on the size.
What is the question?
Oh, it's just such a large city, but
They are Wentzville, O'Fallon.
they're gonna keep
They're
growing.
large cities, but in terms of the
They
level of service, it's similar.
Offer more scratch. Like, I don't know. I don't think I'm going to care how big the
Yeah, that's
city
right.
is. Like,
perfect.
that's
Yeah, when it comes to staff, I
Yeah,
think
there's
Yeah, but-
population data at the bottom of your spreadsheet. Yes, they are big.
And Chesterfield that you're currently using is at 50.
50,000, yeah.
Yeah, I think the question is O'Fallon is significantly bigger even than Wentzville and Chesterfield.
I think they're
It's
what, 90?
93.
Yeah, okay.
93.5.
I mean, this is way out there, but like, is there a reason we picked O'Fallon and not St. Peter's? Or is, I don't know any, I mean,
You know, some of the two that you referenced earlier had St. Peter's on it, so there's no rhyme or reason. The logic is the same.
Is it a problem to add St. Peter's?
It is not. It should not be.
To me, it seems like the more, I mean, without, I mean, if I'm in this I mean, I'm not in this market, but if I were looking as an employee looking for opportunities in my metropolitan area, I would be casting my net
Yes,
to these cities.
right.
If I were.
Well,
that would-
and likely a lot of staff maybe live out there, you know, and so
So, I mean, but that's
so
anecdotal
if I
intuition.
were considering either it's staff that we want to retain, if we're potentially considering them as looking, then that.
So a suggestion was made by someone in the audience. Any thoughts about St. Charles City? And if you look at the two lists from before, I believe, is it Clayton included St. Charles City? I would suggest we limit it to cities and not counties. They included a county, but
Yeah, no,
it's
I
worth
wouldn't include
considering
counties.
St. Charles City.
well, and I think it's worth considering St. Peter's too. I mean, considering Clayton and Kirkwood, who we know are comparators.
Right.
Included them.
I see no, I mean, and I've heard from our subject matter expert that adding more isn't problematic. In fact, that could maybe help us.
Correct. The only thing
But-
that's going to change is now when you decide where you want to be at in the market, it may no longer be at the 75th or 90th because the group is bigger. You know, you may have chosen places that are paying much better, you know, compared to the original group, and you are no longer at that high of a level. Maybe it is the 60th percentile, whatever the case may be. I have no idea, you know, certainly in advance where the numbers are going to shake out. But it's really just trying to have the philosophy, as you've said in explaining it to employees, like you want to make sure that, you know, where you are competing for labor and for the employees and where they're commuting from, that, you know, they're being considered in terms of what's fair pay. That's the goal, and to make sure that's as reasonable and inclusive of a list as possible, and that makes sense.
So with these new add-ons, you should acknowledge the fact that now all the comparators, if you go with the comparator list we have, are not just limited to St. Louis County. They're now in St. Charles County as well. Does it make a difference? Not necessarily.
I don't think
I
it
don't
makes
think
a
it does.
difference
Right.
because I know a lot of that. I go out to St. I mean, I work out. I have business out there. I mean, that's a
The short
That
drive.
would- yeah, it's a short.
It's not unheard of for people
It's
from here
predomin-
to
it's
drive out
common,
there for work or
like,
there
or
drive
back.
here to work.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't.
Like one of them used Columbia, Missouri, and I don't agree with that.
Yes.
That's just too, other than this particular firefighter a few years ago. I
And
can't
they might have
imagine-
done that because they have an electric utility, and maybe, I don't know for a fact
makes
whether
sense, yeah.
Columbia has that or not. Maybe that is a factor.
But like that, that's too far to me, St. Charles.
I would agree. I'm thinking of where would I drive to go to work.
Not Columbia.
So, okay, so are we, is,
Need a motion, or
I
is that
suppose,
just
is there,
No, no,
I
no.
sort of as a
Motions
put a
to
bow on it,
formalize it.
is a city that you feel strongly about not on this list? All right, so,
So I'll make a motion to recommend the comparators to be the list that Tangela read. If you want me to reread them, I can, but I think the original comparators, and then, do you want me to read them, or? And then adding Bridgeton, Crestwood, Eureka, Manchester, O'Fallon, Olivet, St. Peter's, Sunset Hills, University City, Wentzville, and St. Charles City,
Not counting.
not counting. I think so.
Mhm.
Okay. And, what about the fire, like, we mentioned fire protection districts, do we?
Do you still need that, given the fact that
But no-
it's been expanded, given
They're-
what
I think they're
Alderwoman
in
Sims
that.
said?
In terms of just cleaning up the record, do you want to get through? your
Let's frame
motion
through that,
first,
so
and then
that's
we
the
can-
motion on comparator cities.
Second.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, roll call.
Chairwoman Sims?
Yes.
Alderman Gould?
Yes.
Am I on? Alderwoman Tice?
Yes.
Alderwoman Harder? Motion carries 4-0.
Okay, and then I kind of cut you off there, but you wanted to talk about fire protection districts. Are
Well,
we?
just, I mean, is
Already
that,
covered in it?
is that, do we have enough? Do we want to do like, so on the fire protection districts, does it make sense to add a large number of them? Does it make sense to do what Clayton did? The tax base is really different, so I mean, I said before, like, I really want to be fair to the firefighters and also to respect our municipal taxpayers in a different budget.
Sure. Relative to them, I mean, it's a harder question, based on, like you said, their funding opportunities. I mean, there's this whole approach, there's two different ways of, in my opinion, of looking at it. One is, the ability to pay, and the other one is who you are competing against for labor. So all your firefighters now could theoretically go work at one of the fire protection districts. That's addressing that latter part that I was talking about, independent of how well or they are able to pay relative to, Brentwood. So if you believe, and maybe a reasonable thing to do would be to, whether the chief would know or not, have you lost or do you attract a number of firefighters to any of the fire protection districts? And if the answer is yes, that is no different in a lot of cases what you are experiencing for any other job title there. If you're losing people to O'Fallon, okay, that's been part of the discussion on including places like that. I'd say the same thing would be also true of the fire protection districts, if that makes sense.
All right, so gather my thoughts here. The fire protection districts and municipalities compete for the same individuals. We have the same certifications. We work the same schedules. We respond to the same incidents. To me, that's a comparator. I completely understand the funding mechanism being separate. As fire chief and assistant fire chief, over the course of those years, we have lost members to fire protection districts. We have not hired anyone who worked at a fire district to come to Brentwood.
How many did you lose in your, in the last, let's say in the last 8 years? How many firefighters have you lost to protection districts? I use 8 because that's how long I've been in Alderman.
Sure. So,
like, just
so
came to mind.
firefighters to leave our department to specifically go to districts, we have lost 2 in that time frame.
Haven't you hired anyone from the other districts?
They don't apply here.
Like-
So are there fire protection districts that you would recommend that are added to the discussion as we look at comparator?
The model that was presented by the city of Clayton, I think, is a healthy model.
Okay.
And they gathered districts that we from the central region lose firefighters to, combine that data, and they, as you said, they became one comparator in the study. Healthy start.
I will make a motion to have the following fire protection districts averaged as one external comparator: West County EMS and Fire Department, Monarch, Fire Protection District, excuse me, Monarch, Creve Coeur, Maryland Heights, O'Fallon, Central County, and Wentzville.
Second.
Okay, we've got a motion made by Alderwoman Tice, a second by Alderman Gould. Is there any further discussion? All right, seeing none, roll call.
Alderwoman Sims.
Yes.
Alderman Gould. Yes. Alderwoman Tice.
Yes.
Alderwoman Harder.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-0.
Are there further action items you need from us tonight in order to, I guess, have the kickoff meeting? We're preparing to prepare for the preparations.
So I think this would be a good time to speak to the percentile and give specific directions. And we kind of talked about that during the interview, that you would want them to run the numbers for 75th perhaps and 95th, or just 95th, given the city's current philosophy. So maybe you all can speak to that.
Well, given that we've just, entirely changed
The
our
comparators?
pool,
Uh-huh.
I'm not sure we should have that approach, because
Just wait
the
until see
old
what
time,
comes
the
back.
old ways may not
Okay.
be helpful.
So they should
um,
run what, though? They're going to start somewhere.
Well, I typically run all the percentiles.
That,
Okay.
there you
so
go.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of, I think this is a new era, right? It's a new relationship. I'm excited to see the process play out and follow the data, not to over-engineer or push you into a specific place to be. I think that's what we need to do, and have fair discussions about where we want to be as a city. That isn't so regiment on, well, we have to be at this.
Okay.
Let it play out and let's see.
And so with that, I guess you'll run all of them. Is that right?
That's the way that was part of the presentation. I typically run 20 to 80, and I can expand it wider or narrower. It's easy enough to do. That's the kind of our process is to be tailor-made for each and every client, because that's what makes the most sense.
I would say
you go
then-
on strategic decisions on where you want to place things at the end of the day.
I would say then I think the ceiling should be 95. And then I guess the floor, I guess you said 20, but I mean, we'd at least like to know what the 95th percentile looks like. Whether or not we do that is, a conversation for another day. But instead of stopping at 80,
Right, that is changing one number, so it's the math is already created for any number, that any percentile, high or low, that's desired.
okay.
So versus having the 20th percentile, I don't assume we'd go that low. Could he just do 50 to 95th?
Well,
You want to see it?
only because we're now it's because we've put so many other new people, and to me it sounds like it sounds as if that's not, it's not hard for him to run. I am not advocating a floor of 20%. I want to make that clear to everybody. But that that was what he had as the floor on his presentation. And it was at 80, and I'm saying at least have it be a 95.
The intention is for each and every job title, for employees and for the board and administration, to know what the, distribution or how the titles are being paid, high to low, and just for that information to be, out there. I mean, are there places, and I'll use the 20th because it was presented, that pay that low? Well, yes, it does. That means 2 out of 10 places do if you only have 10 respondents. That's a fact. I've never made the recommendation to be at that low of a level, but I've also had the experience, and it's not always a fun one, where because of budgetary constraints and with the list of comparators, fair and reasonable for the organization, that the money just wasn't there, and they've had to be at the 35th percentile. And that's a very hard thing to say to employees that 2 out of 3 places are paying better than, the community. Um, but it is, being upfront and honest with them. This is based on the budget, the best we can do. And then to say, all right, but this is how we intend to get to a more respective level and the process for going there. So again, it's just, for me, it's being upfront and transparent to all parties and say, here's the facts, and being adults and making intelligent decisions based on those facts.
Great, I think we're off to a good start. Rick, we look forward to working with you. I guess we'll leave it to, and now I guess you'll do your thing and we'll hear back for when we'll have this kickoff meeting, whether that's next month at the regular session or some other time in the future. Are there any other more questions? All right, not seeing any. Thank you very much for joining us by Zoom tonight. We look forward to the information you'll produce to us in the times to come.
Very good. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a great night.
Okay, moving on, item 4C is the discussion of the implications of the Maplewood, St. Anne, Ferguson settlement of the city of Brentwood's insurance coverage with Slate.
I will take that. So I think it was sometime last year that, maybe, that John Sharpie with Thomas McGee came before the city to talk about the impact from the St. Anne Maplewood settlement. And what he said at that time really still holds true for now. There has been no impact because these incidents occurred over a period of time, but the claim, we became knowledgeable about the claim in 2016, and then we set aside reserves for that liability in 2017, and there's a retention limit and then excess insurance to cover the difference. So those represent liability on the Slate financial statement, and until there's a settlement. And now there has been 3 settlements for all 3 cities. Compounding that at the time, and I think he talked about how the sentence was structured regarding what we thought was an exclusion. Come to find out, different interpretation. There was really no exclusion for class action lawsuit, but now working with the Slate attorney, that has now been reworded so that that is now in place. So there is now an exclusion for class action lawsuit. So if you have specific questions, I can answer that, but there continues to be no impact. Maybe there is a thought out there that there will be a special assessment against the members of Slate. I'm on the board. We talk about that, but to date there has not been any special assessment, and we continue to hear from other municipalities in the region who, because of the increased cost of insurance, would like to join Slate, but there is a standard to join. You have to be a professionally managed city. We look at your claims history, whether it's for health, whether it's for workers' comp, whether it's for liability, and do an analysis of that before we would allow you to join, because you're now seeing double-digit increases, and now you're like, oh my God, we need to find a better way to cover this cost. That doesn't necessarily mean the Slate Board wants to shift that cost to all its members. So, I'm looking out for the interest of the city, as is everybody on the Slate Board, for not just the cities they represent, but for the membership entirely, because we want to keep this going, because we all remember a time and place when cities we were facing difficulty in getting insurance, and now, if not for the grace of having Slate, we're all in a better place. And when there are good years, those returns are returned to the cities. They are not returned to stockholders and owners of those private insurance companies.
I just have one question. I think you said it, I want to clarify. So there were 3 outstanding cases, and he had mentioned, it was, And then one was in one had settled and one was still in mediation. So they've now all settled. So,
Slate paid those claims. So one of the things that came out of that is that now definitively class action lawsuits are an coverage by Slate. All right, I've not seen any other questions. Thank you. All right, moving on. Item 5 on the agenda are 5A is financial statements.
we actually didn't have attachments here, so. Oh, okay, oh, sorry.
Not have attachments. Currently outstanding are December,
Thank you for the
January, and
explanation.
February. And I probably should have did a memo. They are outstanding due to the auditor and the audit work that's being done. One item on tonight will actually impact December. Monday night, we did our last expense back to 2023. December, January, and February, the revenues are being sent back for sales tax as appropriate. Next week, we will finalize those internally. There's nothing glaring that doesn't look normal and customary. So we are still watching them, but once again, in order to part of what we did internally in finance department was we inserted a check cash machine, so we no longer send there are some strides internally that we're making. Those, if they are prior to the next Ways and Means, I'll have Bola post them and we'll put them out. But I expect by next week to make all of these estimations. Thank you.
No, not seeing any. Thank you. All right, item 6 on the agenda is the consent agenda. There are 2 items. Has everybody had an opportunity to review the minutes from February 1 and February 20?
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Okay, any discussion? Roll call?
Chairwoman Sims.
Yes.
Alderman Gould.
Yes.
Alderwoman Tice.
Yes.
Alderwoman Harder. Motion carries 4-0.
Great, thank you. We have no old business, which leads us to item 8, which is new business. 8A is the resolution for a 2023 budget amendment to the 2023 adopted budget.
Again, internally, there is a memo indicating the budget adjustment and the items, and behind it are the actual line items and the necessary adjustments that were required. There's nothing overly glaring when I look at these that weren't necessarily discussed throughout the course of business. Some of them needed to be full-time salaries and overtimes, and that was in the police department. That was due to sort of ramping up with the bike team and other things like that. The general services, that's based upon festival expenses and sort of those increased expenses. We also did the transfer to pay off the sewer lateral earlier. So they are itemized in here. I don't know that you want me to go through them individually. But once again, this is also to meet the audit requirements. We'll do the adjustment. This will hit my December budget and actuals, and then the
Um,
23 budget amendment for the 2023 adopted budget.
Second.
All right, we've got a motion by Alderman Gould and a second by Alderwoman Tice. Is there any discussion? All right, not seeing any. Roll call?
Chairwoman Sims.
Yes.
Alderman Gould.
Yes.
Alderwoman Tice.
Yes.
Alderwoman Harder. Motion carries.
Great, thank you. Item 8B on the budget is the request for Kerber, Eck, and Breckel independent review of expenditures. This is your moment to
Just
shine.
stay up here.
The request for Kerber, Eck, and Breckel, independent review of expenditures of proceeds of the 2019 series certificates of participation, amendment to agreement.
The previous audit was done for third quarter. They had quite a litany of outstanding items. It was this current audit, which I believe was also on the board meeting on Monday, actually had 0 exceptions and 0 exemptions. So it was an exemplary audit for the fourth quarter. Part of what we're running into is we've actually expired these certificates of participation. Current expenditures coming through don't meet those requirements. So the need for the potential of them to continue to audit the funds is sort of diminishing. Bola and I, because they wanted to up the agreement because of the number of hours they were spending auditing the items. And I think they're going to change the methodology to move it to number of hours because they felt like they were losing time. And think until they realize we don't really have any dollars left. Find that minimum number of expenditures. The oversight was, I guess, potentially not having the staff, so somebody could do the oversight of spending of these dollars and make sure that they met all of the requirements was the need for the audit. Everything else is now running through the board packets. As Brentwood found other spending, and we own warrants as well. And Navigate is also overseeing those funds. I'm not sure whether or not we engage with them again. I think that's the second level of this. One, the fourth quarter audit as well, with 0 exceptions. Secondly, they wanted a different manner.
Yes, that's correct. So the recommendation is, Michelle?
It actually might be less if they do it hourly. I mean, they wanted to remove, you were paying a flat fee of $1,100, and they were finding that the number of hours they were spending on it when you were really utilizing those dollars and auditing the number of items they were auditing, signatures and the trail, they were spending more time than they were recouping. Run through UMB and to be
So you're suggesting that we potentially just modify the engagement with them to be based on an hourly basis for the relatively small amount of money that is left?
With the hope that we don't end up spending equally the same amount.
They requested from us that they were changing the terms of the engagement based upon the number of hours.
And then moving forward, you don't, they're really,
Yeah.
we wouldn't need them, hopefully, theoretically.
2,500, because we've spent all the
engagement with the city would
COPS money that's remaining.
So their engagement was specific to reviewing, or to auditing the COPS money, is that
Yes.
right?
correct.
And we only have $2,500 left in that pool.
Yes, and the items that sit at UMB associated with this COPS that they were auditing, correct.
I mean, I'm inclined to think we don't need an auditor for $2,500.
And I guess I feel that way too, unless we feel like because they're COPS money, that we should finish it out and be able to tell the taxpayers that
That makes
that's
sense.
how we managed it.
In that case, should it just be, in that case, would the recommendation be it should be on an hourly basis?
So if there's a motion, then we'll bring a new agreement to the board. An amended agreement
So
for the
i-
hourly.
is- If I took a stab at it, is it the motion to amend the agreement to convert to an hourly basis for auditing services of the remaining COPS money with KDB?
So moved. Said.
Yeah, okay, we had a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All right, roll call.
Chairwoman Sims.
Yes.
Alderman Gould.
Yes.
Alderwoman Tice. Alderwoman Harder. Motion carries 4-0.
All right, item 8C on the agenda is citizen comment at public meetings.
Mayor Dimmitt has directed the city attorney to prepare an ordinance to amend the Brentwood City Code to restrict citizen comments during the board meetings to agenda items on the agenda. And so now there will be a procedure by which people will be recognized when they want to speak. So public comment period, we've taken a look at it and believe that that is about 15 minutes maybe when people show up to speak. But so now they could come up, they'll say their name, what they're there to talk about, and they'll be limited to 3 minutes. And Dan has started to work with Kelly to find some sort of timer that we will put up in here if this is adopted, so that staff and maybe you all can kind of visually see it and regulate that. So the mayor just wants to make sure that there's so many items on the agenda and you can stay focused within that. But then if they stay till the end, the second public comment period, then they could speak to items that aren't necessarily on the agenda. But this is the structure that he would like to adopt going forward.
I have a question. Let's say I'm the mayor. I'm not, but let's say I am, and I am running my meeting. Somebody comes up and is, I'll say, unruly or shout or something. Am I not vested with the ability to have them escorted from removed?
Right. And part of this is also, I don't know if you all saw the St. Louis County Council meeting and how that just went south. And so this is also to kind of make sure that, because I think the person that was speaking to an item that was not on the agenda, and it was somewhat difficult to remove that individual. So everybody had to be escorted out. So this was what, propelled him to give consideration to this. But yes, the mayor is vested with the authority to
So if
have that
someone is
individual removed.
shouting,
Absolutely.
That person can be removed now.
Exactly.
I mean, I'm inclined, I would advance this to the large board, but I find this stifling. I mean, I don't, we've never really had issues with citizens abusing citizen comment. In fact, I think I can recall one instance where I was glad that a citizen came and brought an item that was particular to my ward to our attention. I know I read the agenda, but I would be surprised. I mean, they're not, the idea that they'd be cut off from a citizen comment because the item wasn't on an agenda, I mean, it just sort of hamstring them with the procedure. And then to make them wait all the way to the, dead end of the meeting, I'm not, it seems like I understand that the problem has been real for St. Louis County, but we haven't had that problem with our citizens.
Well, I was going to say, in addition, like, that's not even how it reads. Like, it just reads that it has to be about an item, and it doesn't talk about the second comment period. So I don't even see in the proposed language that it allows for a comment from anyone in the second comment period. So
Right.
even if this goes forward, I think that needs to be added for just.
That's his intent. It's not reflected in here, but that's what he shared with me, which is why I said it.
Okay, well, then I think
Yeah,
or, I mean, I guess we could also vote it.
And
Put it on
there's
it
no,
here.
and so it can be amended and brought back. I don't know that there's, trying to speak for him and not speak for him, whether there's any kind of, hurriedness to this. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I share Chairwoman Sims's perspective on it. There are other touch points that our constituents are able to speak with us about. Board meetings, I've always told everybody, these are unofficial, informal meetings. We don't have to have these board meetings, but we do. So there are often times when we have people that come to ward meetings and have a comment about something that we say, to get it onto the public record, show up at this meeting and talk about it, just so the rest of the board or even just the minutes reflect it. And I think it's important to have that ability for people in the public to come forward and speak to us in a more formal environment. We haven't had an issue, even when we've had, controversial or heated subject matters. People still seem to be somewhat respectful, and we do have the policy of 3 minutes. So I think a clock timer to say, okay, your 3 minutes is up, is not a bad thing. But I don't know that we should be restricting people in the first, citizen comments to be able to only speak about those agenda items. That personally, I don't know why we would do that.
And I can't say that, as I hold this gavel and I'm drunk with power tonight, I can see that clock and I can see 3 minutes pass by. I'm not sure we need to have a buzzer beater. I don't know. I think if you're a citizen and you're gonna muster up the courage to come forward and stand at the podium in front of a microphone, the floor is yours for 3 minutes. And unless you're breaking the law, unless you.
So if for some reason we can always hit the.
It was not his idea to buy that, it was ours, and so the clocks on both ends serve that purpose, and I think we went to this digital clock so that you all could
Because
see
you
it.
can see it.
Exactly.
And I think, and that's, and certainly if there's discretion to let someone speak longer, I yield to that, but I feel like it's rare that they take the full 3 minutes. And I think the most corrections I've observed is that a citizen makes the mistake of thinking that it's some kind of question and answer session. And that's pointed out that it's not, and they seem to move on. I can't think of many instances where this has been a problem.
Well, and I'll add one, that there are times when a citizen came recently and they were really concerned about one of the committees, an action of one of the committees. So that's never going to get to our agenda, but they certainly have every right and to come, and we all probably needed to hear what they had to say. So
I don't see a reason to forward this on to the full board.
Certainly not as
Honestly,
written.
certainly.
if this isn't time sensitive and the mayor would like to take some of the feedback that we've had and the discussion we've
You
had
can share this with them.
and modify, the purpose and reasoning for why this is so important, and then bring it back, then maybe I'd be compelled, but I kind of where I'm at with it.
That's good enough for me. We will share this with the mayor.
All right, item 8D is the CPRG implementation grant application.
So this is something we've been talking about in Sustainability Commission, but because of things have just popped up this week, we wanted to get in front of you guys as well. So last year, the East-West Gateway Council announced that they're working on a St. Louis Climate Action Plan, and we're going to use the CPRG funds to help implement that plan. What they're looking for from communities were projects, almost shovel-ready projects that you could do that would help with their climate action plan. So for discussing with sustainability, and because they were really focused on getting this plan together and were interested at the time, said they would fully fund things, we went all out. We said solar array panel on this, the rec center. We said police vehicles, electric street sweeper, electric trash truck, and then ultimately the charging stations for those vehicles. Thinking maybe we'll get one, maybe we'll get a couple, doesn't hurt to throw our names in the hat. So Last week, we heard from, and honestly, we've been in touch with East West Gateway. They've been contacting us like, hey, if we do the solar panel array, would you be willing to do a solar rebate for residents in your community with a portion of the money you save from the solar? And we had talked about those things, and that all seemed perfectly fine. So then last week, they said that the MoDNR is going to take over the CPRG portion of the grant. And ultimately, they weren't interested in fully funding those projects, and that MoDNR be reaching out to us. So that was last Friday, we got that. Monday or Tuesday, we finally heard from MoDNR, like, yes, we've taken this over, and I kind of put the charts of what our request was, what they're offering in return, and said, we need to get this to the EPA for April 1st, so we need a signed commitment letter from you guys this Friday, tomorrow, and we need to know what projects you guys are interested yesterday. So obviously, we talked to BOLA, and we talked to, I think, Alderman Weggie quickly. We happened to be in a meeting with him, and so ultimately, what we decided to do was let them know that we are still interested in the solar array on the rec center, and then the charging stations. And for a couple of reasons. One is ultimately the amount of funding left over for the city was a little bit more than we were interested in committing to. We know part of the things that MoDNR talked about is really the investment tax credits out there, 30%. They want everyone to take advantage of that. So that's one of the reasons they backed off the fully funded. Like, hey, take advantage of the ITC that's being funded by the federal government. It's great. It's still only 30%, and there's still, while it's pretty likely you'll get it, it's not 100% guarantee. So that way, the largest commitment was for the electric vehicles. Secondarily, we've just talked a lot about vehicles in the fleet with FEMA, and so it seemed like it was duplication of efforts if we did that and then got 4 more police vehicles and another trash truck, and so we decided that. And even if we do the infrastructure if we do the EV charging stations, that then sets us up in the future for electrifying our fleet. We could put one here for planning development. There's conversations about where public works might be. If we know that, then we can put some there and start electrifying fleet there. So we figured that could be a good usage. So that's what we did. We did send that out. We got the commitment letter today. I actually need to show it to Bull after this meeting and make sure that she signs it, and we send it over. But just kind of wanted to let you know where we're at with this process.
So, do we have any money set aside in our budget to pay for the difference in the amount that is offered versus requested?
Yeah, that when we did it, it was going to be fully funded.
Fully funded,
so
right.
That's why it was a simple ask. Now we're looking at different things. I mean, if we get everything done with FEMA, there's obviously money that we invested in capital that then it gets freed up this year, next year. There's a little bit of money, not quite enough, in different areas, so we'd have to look at that. The likelihood that we're going to get this is still unknown because this week has been they kind of threw all this at us all at once and without a whole lot of real information. So we'll know in the next few months what it means, but ultimately, I think if we have those two things, I'll be able to find it.
So if we send this in tomorrow and it's signed, then if we get the money, then we have to come up with the match.
Correct.
Can we get, if we go forward with this process and they say, yes, we'll match, or we'll give you this funding, if you match it, and we say, okay, well, we're not in a financial position for some of these things that we feel comfortable doing that, can we stop the process?
I mean, ultimately, if we don't complete the project, we won't get the grant funding.
Sure.
So
Understood.
And then MoDNR won't want to work with us in the future. Those would be probably the two rough things.
Wow.
But ultimately, if we don't expend any money, they can't hold us to anything.
The city administrator has signed the document that you're bound by it, and you absolutely have to go through.
Double check that here by the end of the meeting.
Since we're into this, did you have a discussion at the Sustainability Commission about like the solar array on top of the community center? And how much would that save? So, I mean, part of it's like if we got it and we got $214,000 toward a solar array, like it's hard to walk away. But then we have to come up with what, $321,000. And so then over how many years would we, like how much electricity would it produce and how much money would we save and like how long would it take to make it up?
We did have a conversation Tuesday night at sustainability. Sorry, days are getting confused. And ultimately, I'll tell you, the view of the commission was they weren't concerned about the offer because they're confident in the ability to get matching grants from federal government even above the 30%. Now, I don't know if I quite share that same optimism. I do think the 30% is a pretty good realistic number to focus on, so that 535, that left about another, I think what it was about another 75 to 125,000 if we got that 30% on top of the amount offered by MoDNR. So I obviously want to put worst case scenario out there, so this is what the worst case is that we would have to cover that 271. But I'll tell you, and I think Alderwoman Harder could comment as well because she was there, they were surprised that we were leasing the vehicle part of it.
They're surprised that we decided not to move forward with the vehicle part.
They felt comfortable with the federal credits on some of these things, and obviously the Sustainability Commission wants to start moving forward with sustainability.
Well, sure, I mean, that's their, it's their, that's
Yes.
their bias, right? And I understand that. I think there are some decisions that are going to be facing the city this year that we need to probably be conservative about. And this is especially when you look at this, yes, the solar array, maybe it would start immediately seeing some benefit. I've always advocated that if we're going to have charging stations, if it's about sustainability, then they should be powered by a sustainable source. So I think eventually I would like to see solar arrays powering any, charging stations that we have. Eventually. I mean, I just don't know if I'm comfortable with close to having to spend $500,000 on some of these.
What's not included on here, we also had a meeting with Ameren. So there is money, additional money, that could be layered onto this coming from Ameren.
Yeah, I mean, if majority of the money's being spent by other incentives, then
not the city.
that's a different story, but
The interesting thing, or the challenging thing, is that the time frame in which a decision has to be made is so short.
right,
And so we just had a meeting with Ameren. We would have to, and we talked to them about this, but we would have to share it to them to kind of get a better idea of what percentage of this amount would we potentially get back from Ameren to cover it, which would then mean the city's portion of it could possibly be less. In addition to this, there's a little money that has been budgeted for sustainability efforts. So 20,000 is not a lot, but I don't know that has been necessarily spent, so that could also go toward this. So maybe instead of the 4 private charging stations, maybe it's just the solar array, because you all have been talking.
Yeah, but
for
the
years
charging
about-
stations, we don't know what, I mean, that's a down the road infrastructural thing.
Right.
I think until we get an audit done of
Energy
how
audit,
an
right.
energy audit and all that, spending money on infrastructure that isn't even utilized yet is
Right,
is
no
kinda-
vehicles yet. So what are you thinking about the first one, solar array, or maybe not?
I mean, I think that one's, out of all of them, that seems the most practical. I mean, especially when you look at, where some of this, EV development is heading. You're starting to see more and more manufacturers say, we're looking at, hydrogen fuel cell EVs for larger vehicles is much more practical for long term. So there's still changes going on in this. And so, as it relates to trash trucks and street sweepers, and, I don't know that that's really where we need to be yet. Solar array on the community center, I can make a practical, case for. That probably makes sense, especially if we can tie in the current charging, infrastructure we have there. So anyway.
Obviously, the commitment letter, they'd like it back tomorrow.
So this really isn't for informational purposes only, is it?
The speed at
We
which
could
have
walk
to-
away from it and then hope that there's money next year.
There will be.
Well, I mean, I'm not really comfortable walking away from this. I think this is something that we have a sustainability committee. They've been looking at this for a long time. We ended up, was it the trash truck that we got a grant for, and we ended up buying a little early because we got $35,000, and now we're looking at a lot of money that's coming from somewhere else. I think the real question that isn't on here is the potential from Ameren, which we don't know. You've reached out.
It's very strong from our meeting with them.
And the potential for other grant opportunities. So, if we could receive most of this money, then that's great. And I think we should go forward because we don't want to be, this is, we're basically, if we don't put this forward, we're walking away from $500,000. Now,
So
we
there's
have to spend money to
20,000
get it.
this year, and so we would need to talk to Michelle and Eric. If 20,000 that's been allotted to sustainability is not spent this year, and another 20 is spent next year, so that's 40 that goes towards and so it's an issue of priorities. If that's the primary priority for the Sustainability Commission and the city, then, and you all did that similarly with stormwater, so that could be an option to consider, to fund this, in addition to what Ameren might offer. Eric?
In looking, I'm trying to do quick math while I'm up here. If the 535, that is a quote we received from an organization that a Brentwood resident reached out to Alderman Weggie. He happens to install solar panels, so that was a quote we had received. If we get the 30% on top of that, which again, I feel fairly confident.
And that's the Ameren 30% or just 30%?
That's a federal,
federal
investment tax credit.
Okay.
Which municipal agencies are available for. So that 30% is another 165. That leaves basically another 165. So what MoDNR basically did was, hey, you'll get half from the tax investment credit. I put you on a hook for the other half, so that 160. If we get to that 160, Michelle, I'm not going to look at Michelle because she's glaring in the back of my head. I can feel it already. I feel confident I could find that because this is a pretty, to get solar array panels on the top for $160,000 is a pretty good idea. Is pretty good deal, right? So, ultimately, I think in listening and understanding exactly what you guys are saying, and again, we were making quick decisions knowing, and we wrote this up quickly so we can come here tonight. If we say, we let them know, look, we're not interested in anything but the solar array. They could say, great, we'll change the commitment letter, send it back to us, we'll sign it, and move forward. If we say, we're not interested in any of it, we can do that. We don't have to sign the commitment letter. And then we don't have to do anything. Again, this came about because it was a no-risk grant, and ultimately, I guess we were one of the few people who put projects in there or had shovel-ready projects for it, and we were lucky enough to be included in both East-West Gateway and this. It's just MoDNR has kind of changed the rules 7 days out of asking for a commitment letter.
So could I ask Alderwoman Harder to talk about the discussion, I guess you could do it too, but the discussion and why you decided to keep the private charging stations without the other vehicles?
They just thought if they had it in place, then when we got they wanted to go with other electric vehicles, they would already have the charging stations. There's no point in having the patrol cars and the other, EV cars without the charging station. So that's.
Yeah, the thought process to add to that is the fact that the Sustainability Commission is going to push for electric vehicles. And I think we have people on the board who are also interested in that as well. And so if we start seeing more electric vehicles coming in the budget, even as next year, we won't be able to do that unless we also put money in infrastructure for these charging stations. So if there was a way to get some of that, in this case, more than half of it paid for, is that a good investment? I mean, it is a good investment, it just might not be the right time for that investment because of other things that we have in consideration for, which is completely
And
understandable.
that's my point is that, you know, we're talking about the compensation study, we're talking about potential building, you know, shifts, you know, some investments even in City Hall that may need to be done. You know, there's, well, when the library, if the library moves out, you know, what are we doing with that space? There's going to be things that we're going to need to look at all those factors and say, okay, what's the priority for the city, not just for the Sustainability Commission, you know, which, you know, I don't know that we have all those, to be able to make this decision this quick, I don't know that we have those factors, or we're even going to get those factors within the next.
The good thing is we can still walk away, and so maybe we spend tomorrow taking a look at that, talking to the city attorney, maybe asking them that question without asking them that question. But then we're asking this committee to make that decision, and we haven't taken it to the board, so
Yeah, I
it's
was saying, yeah,
problematic.
You beat me to my next comment. I mean,
does
this
this
is a
even-
bigger conversation. I mean, it's a lot of money, and I think it should.
I asked Eric, don't they know that we just don't have meetings because they want us to?
Right.
I mean, can they? I mean, I think at the very least this should be discussed at a Board of Aldermen meeting. I mean, what happened? I mean, what is this time frame that they needed by the 8th? I mean, we're not calling a special meeting. But, I mean,
And again, if the board feels more, if the committee feels more comfortable walking away from all of it,
that's not what I said.
yeah, I don't wanna walk
away at all. But that's.
So it's a dilemma, it's a challenge.
But
And
what is
we don't want to overstep by me signing it, and then the board come back and say, who authorized you?
Right,
So,
and I don't think we can
that's not our-
authorize you
No.
to sign anything.
No.
We
Our
are a
committee's-
committee.
It's a dilemma,
like,
yes.
So, I mean, as a practical matter, this is a commitment of money. I think it needs approval from the Board of Aldermen. So I don't exactly understand where this, let's walk away from it. Let's not, that doesn't mean anything. It needs to be approved by the board.
Could we ask them in the strongest terms to delay this till at least all the how many cities or entities, they didn't tell you, have submitted an application? Or are we the only one? Because I thought initially we may have been the only one from around here. Is that right? You don't know? Okay, so I don't have any answers.
We have no power to tell you to sign this tonight, really. I mean, so what?
But I certainly don't want us to walk away. I don't
Yeah,
want
I mean,
the
like, what are
outcome
you
of this
want- what-
meeting to be that we walk away from this, because that should not be.
I mean, but even if we even if we settled on some of those items, that's not how our government works. Like, we need, I mean, I think that would need to go before the board and be approved.
In the morning and speak to their, I think he's Executive Director Jim Wild, and express concern with the time frame, but I don't know if he's the primary decision maker on this, or
Surely
he's.
they're aware that we have constraints as to how our government operates. and
Especially when
we
they
have
make a,
Board of Aldermen meetings.
when they make a shift that's causing us to scramble.
So
That's,
Eric shared this with me, I think on, was it Wednesday afternoon? Yes.
So what happens if you call tomorrow and they
They
say
still no.
can't delay?
Well, I think you all should give me options. What if you call tomorrow and they say yes, then you don't need to do anything with the action you all take tonight. But if you take action and it's positive, and they come back and say, no, you need to make a decision, then we don't sign it. I don't know.
I don't see how you can sign it. I don't see how, if we all four of us said, you go ahead and sign it,
only half
that's not I mean, that's
No,
not
I
an
know.
approval of the
I
city.
know.
half the board.
I know.
I mean,
Well,
this
because you
is-
need 5 votes.
This is a kind of an absurd
Completely.
conversation for the, I mean, for
Completely.
them to impress that on us. I mean, that's a constraint like that means they're not sincere in wanting us to go forward.
And so they have to get this to the federal government? What's their timing?
Deadline to the EPA is April 1st, which is why they wanted everything tomorrow.
And we just found out about it 10 days ago.
Is April 1st.
Not even that.
But
found
there's a
out-
board meeting on the March 18th?
I think what they're trying to do, according to the email I got, they're trying to wrap up their
Application and all
application
that.
to the EPA. Again, I, by no means were we trying to do anything poor, and I feel bad that we're sitting here tonight. I think one of the questions we could ask too is, if it's April 1st for the EPA, while MoDNR runs fast, I've never found anyone in the federal government to run fast. And if implementation is 2025, then it can be a budget consideration for next year. But to Alderman Sims' point, if then during the budget process, we decide not to do it, and we've already signed a commitment letter,
I think we need to push back on the email and say we're gonna need more, we can meet your April 1st, you know, we'll have a decision
Well-
right after board and,
I mean, I don't set Board of Alderman meetings, but I mean, either absent some special meeting or the regularly scheduled meeting.
Right.
Unless I'm missing something, because of the amount, we need board approval for this. So those are the constraints that we are
So
facing.
no action from this committee, and we ask that we will have our information to them by April 19th.
Well, and
March 19th.
I hate to propose this, but like, could there be a Zoom meeting about this if necessary? I don't know if the mayor's still.
Mayor's
Are
absent.
you aware of this? I mean, is this?
He's not, because this just happened Wednesday.
So, I mean,
Well, we can't do it tomorrow. I'm thinking sometime next week. I mean, I just don't see how we can.
We could do it. I mean, he doesn't vote.
That's right. We have
So,
a mayor
but-
pro. or
unless
we-
it's
A
a
tie.
4-4
Tie.
tie.
yes,
So-
but as the chair of the meet, doesn't he set the kind of?
The mayor pro temp in his absence would call for the special meeting.
Have nerve to take a vacation.
No, he did not.
Well, the way he is, he would.
Well, I leave it in Alderman Plufka's good hands, right? He's our pro
Yeah.
tem,
He's
right?
our pro tem.
I mean, that's where we are. I mean, I don't want to walk away from it, but I'm also not going to.
Yeah, maybe Public Works, we have Public Works meeting next week, so maybe we can do it on that same evening, maybe a little earlier. This will be the only item on the agenda that, if everybody's available, what day is that? The 13th?
I mean, and I'd like some explanation of.
And then
like,
we would
how
engage Michelle to do a better analysis on the
fund-
numbers.
I mean, like, how would we pay for this? When would we pay
Yes,
for this?
Michelle.
Like,
But I don't understand why we'd need to do a special meeting on the 14th. We've got a meeting on the schedule on the 18th. That still gives them 2 weeks before their deadline.
Sure.
To me, it's going back to them and trying to be reasonable and say, we have scheduled meetings, this has to go to a full board for discussion and approval.
Can do that
We will
too.
have an answer for you by the 19th and move forward. And if they say, you know, sorry, you tell me now or no.
But
I don't
honestly,
know- I
Alderman
don't-
Gould, between, go, no go, I'd attend a special meeting, like.
No, understood, understood. I just
I'm
don't know
not-
what, for their perspective, I don't know what the 14th or the 18th is, matters.
They need more time apparently to put their application together.
But I mean, I'm not suggesting, and I don't agree with the position of pound sand unless you wait till our regular meeting. Like,
Right.
if it's gonna do, I mean, I'll
Yeah.
find.
No,
the
I hear ya.
time,
Like,
but-
I hear you.
I mean, I also think it's not unreasonable to go to them and say, we can't do it by tomorrow. We're looking at a special meeting. Like, we could do it by Zoom at noon.
Give them the option.
Like Zoom on Tuesday and then,
Staff needs runway to.
but we need information from Michelle to
to put this together. I see you're like scrunching into your chair.
Like, I'm working on the audit.
Right.
I mean, my preference would be the regular meeting if they'll do that.
Yeah, that is the preference. but-
Why not,
So it would not require a special meeting. We'll,
But,
Eric-
how about this? I'll make a motion that we try to, that we ask staff to reach out to who is it, Department of Transportation? DNR. Oh, DNR, yeah. Mo DNR, and ask them, inform them that we can't make a decision until the entire board approves this, because it has to do with funding, and that we plan to do that at our March 18th meeting. And we'll have an answer by the 19th, with the caveat that if they give us an extension, maybe through Tuesday or Wednesday next week, they can't go the whole next, maybe they give us a week extension, that we would have a special meeting one day next week via Zoom. That way,
If the 18th
if the
is not
18th is absolutely,
off the table.
thank you.
That was a long
Long
motion,
motion.
but I think
Does
I
that work,
tracked.
though? Does that make
I'll
sense?
second that.
Okay, we have a motion I'm not going to repeat. By Alderwoman Tyson, a second by Alderman Gould. Is there any further discussion on that? All right, seeing none, roll call.
Chairwoman Sims.
Yes.
Alderman Gould.
Yes.
Alderwoman Tyson.
Yes.
Alderman Harder. Motion carries.
Yeah.
All right,
Didn't, well, like, what if they say no tomorrow?
but I don't think we cannot authorize her. I mean, I'll
Yeah.
stick my neck out that big. I
Yeah.
mean, it's a commitment of money. It would be meaningless to say, yeah, as a committee, sure, go ahead. Like, it's not board action. So if that is truly the fact pattern, they were never sincere in the offer to begin with,
And
in
this
my
is not
view.
going to be the last
Like-
grant ever for these type of sustainability initiatives. So it's,
We want to work with them.
urgency of it is not like, oh,
So, the last item, 9A, it's that unruly citizen comment, portion. And I'm not seeing anyone in the audience that
But we have
doesn't work
someone
here.
But we do have someone online.
Do we have someone online? Would they like to say something?
Yes.
Oh, look, yes, the hand is raised,
It's
is that Karen Smith?
Mhm.
Yeah, am I unmuted?
Yes, you are. The
Okay, great.
citizen
Thank you.
comment's all yours.
I'm your unruly citizen comment.
Yes.
So, I actually was gonna comment on 8C and, I guess try and, ask for more explanation, or understand that a little bit more, like the rationale and reasoning behind it, and I appreciated all of your comments. When I was sort of skimming it, I thought, some of the rationale was to be respectful of time, and I was just wondering, with the way that the meetings are scheduled, where you limit the 3-minute comment period, you have moved a lot of the administrative type functions to a consent agenda format. It seems like the meetings to me run very smoothly, and some of the more recent meetings have been done in like record time. I think, from a time perspective, it seems like they are respectful of all of your time. And then I was not aware of something that happened at St. Louis County. I'd love to know more about what happened there. But it just, if we want to be like an open, inclusive, and transparent community, it seems to take us in an opposite direction of that. Because I guess I look at our Board of Aldermen as an opportunity to engage the public. We also have a nice city hall and for people to see that. And I know in some of the correspondence it said that there are other touch points, but they aren't the same as the Board of Aldermen meeting. And they aren't even structured the same. Some of them aren't held at City Hall. They're not there's not summaries, they're not videoed. So I think it would just kind of cut off the ability for citizens to engage with the Board of Aldermen. So I appreciate the comments that you all made, and I'm hopeful that we'll be able to still touch on things that aren't on the agenda. And like, for example, I'm pretty sure the library board came forward and used the public comment session to start engagement around their plans and a time when they weren't specifically on the agenda. So like, that's an opportunity to learn about things that are going on that, there's opportunities to learn about things that are going on that aren't on the agenda. So thank you.
Thank you, in particular for hanging around to make a citizen comment. We appreciate that. I sincerely mean that. All right, seeing no further business, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.